Today, records broken in the southeast as heatwave conditions grip several states. Also ahead, Sydney police and volunteers desperately search for a missing 12-year-old boy with autism who was last seen on Saturday morning.
We're highly concerned. This is as high risk as it gets for us with a missing person.
Household items such as toothbrushes, toasters, pyjamas and fridges could be cheaper at the checkout, with import taxes to be cut from the 1st of July. And Australia's Margot Robbie in the running for an Oscars trophy for Barbie, as Poor Things dominates with back-to-back wins. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Ros Childs. Temperature records have been broken in Australia's southeast as heat waves continue in Victoria and in South Australia. Victoria is sweltering through its hottest Labor Day long weekend in some 80 years, prompting today's Moomba parade to be called off. Temperatures are forecast to reach the mid to high 30s across almost every district of Victoria for a third day. A 3-day severe heat wave is also gripping South Australia. Adelaide has endured close to its hottest March night on record. However, Mad March festivities and the Adelaide Cup will go ahead. Senior meteorologist Sarah Scully says relief won't come for a few more days.
It's been around 10 to 15 degrees above average, and that's both the minimums and the maximums right across southeastern Australia over this long weekend. Look, there have been some records broken. In particular, that's been really hot nights. Melbourne's had a number of March overnight minimum temperature records broken, and there's also been some maximum temperatures. In Adelaide and Melbourne, the minimum temperatures have been were between around 25 to 30 degrees on Saturday night. We've had a blocking high pressure system pattern, which is where there's a really strong and stubborn, really, high pressure system sitting in the Tasman Sea that directs hot northerly winds over southeastern Australia. And these blocking high pressure systems also prevent cold fronts from being able to sweep across the southern parts of the country and flush away the heat.
Reporter Charles Bryce joins us now from Adelaide. So, Charles, how hot is it there at the moment?
Ros, it's already 37 degrees here in Adelaide. We are going for a top of 38 degrees, which will be our third day in a row of temperatures in the high 30s or the low 40s. Temperatures really haven't dropped below the mid-20s for the past few days, so it's made for some really hot and uncomfortable nights. At 4 o'clock this morning, it was still 30 degrees. Extreme fire danger conditions are forecast for the west coast, the lower and eastern Eyre Peninsula, the York Peninsula, the Mount Lofty Ranges and the lower southeast. And total fire bans are in place for those areas with that low intensity heat wave continuing. Temperatures are forecasted to be in the mid to high 30s for the majority of South Australia, and with some areas like Ceduna on the west coast and Oodnadatta in the north reaching into the 40s. We spoke to CFS Duty Commander Brendan Hasty earlier this morning, and he spoke about those dangerous fire conditions.
One of the key concerns we've got at the moment is it's been a long time since we've had any rain whatsoever, so the underlying dryness in the fuels can create more extreme fire behaviour than what would otherwise be expected. So our crews and our aircraft will be looking to get on any new fire starts quickly this morning before they're able to build ahead of steam.
Ros, that hasn't stopped thousands of people over the weekend flocking to the festivals that we have on here in Adelaide, the Adelaide Fringe Festival and WOMAD and the Adelaide Festival as well. All seeing really strong attendances over the weekend. Of course, the Adelaide Cup is running today as well.
Yeah, well, there have been concerns about the Adelaide Cup, which is on today. Charles, haven't there?
Yeah, it's the RSPCA that have raised their concerns about the animal welfare and the animals getting heat stress in these really high temperatures. Chief Vet at Racing SA, Dr. Toby Koenig, says the temperatures don't raise any major concerns, although they will be remaining vigilant. They have put in extra precautions. They have enacted their hot weather policy There are going to be additional misting fans for both racegoers and the animals, and extra water buckets. Jamie Carr, one of the jockeys that is racing in Adelaide today, she said that the racetrack may be one of the best places for horses today. She said it would be extremely hot for the horses if they were to remain in paddocks around South Australia. She said that they will be afforded those hose downs as well. But the Adelaide Cup, it is due to run at 4:15 local time, with the temperatures still predicted to be around 36 degrees at that time.
Charles, thank you. The search for a child with autism and Down syndrome who's missing from Sydney's west has entered its third day. 12-year-old Hussein Al-Mansouri was last seen running from Auburn Memorial Park on Saturday morning. Reporter Ethan Ricks joins us now from Sydney. So Ethan, police have spoken this morning. What is the latest?
Well, Ros, police say that this search operation has already passed a critical stage. It's been more than 48 hours now since 12-year-old Hussein Al-Mansouri was last seen here at the Auburn Memorial Park. He was then captured later on CCTV footage at the Auburn train station, but it's understood he did not catch a train. Now, the next day on Sunday, about 15 minutes drive away from here, it's understood Hussein was spotted by residents near Norval Street. But when police arrived at that location, Hussein was nowhere to be found. Now, police continue to hold serious concerns for Hussein's well-being, as he has autism and Down syndrome and is non-verbal, which they say adds a level of difficulty to their search as they try to draw him out of any possible hiding spots. We heard today they're implementing different strategies to try and find him. That includes playing his favourite music to try and draw him out of some of those locations of interest. They've been searching through all weekend and all night, and again this morning. We know that about 100 SES volunteers are now out today looking for Hussein, but we heard from New South Wales Police earlier, who gave us a brief update on the search for Hussein.
We're highly concerned. This is as high risk as it gets for us with a missing person. He's 12 years old, he's got special needs, and he's been out and about by himself for 48 hours now. So it's as high risk as it gets. Obviously, the footage of him just in a T-shirt, a nappy, no shoes, just shows how vulnerable he is. So if anyone does see him, we ask they call 000, maintain visual contact or visual sighting of him, and stay on the phone to 000. We ask that you don't necessarily approach him directly, because that could cause him to run off again.
We understand family are assisting police with that search. Police say the family are devastated by his disappearance. While detectives are involved in this case, they understand that nothing so far indicates that anything sinister has taken place. And I just want to reiterate that message from police there. If you do happen to see Hussein in the area, don't approach him, but make sure you keep sight of him and make sure that you contact police as soon as possible. Ros?
Ethan, thank you. Rescue crews have resumed their search for a swimmer who went missing in waters off Sydney's eastern suburbs last night. Emergency services were called to Bronte Beach at around 8 o'clock after a man disappeared in the ocean. Surf lifesavers, police and air ambulance searched into the night for the swimmer. Anyone with information is being urged to contact police. And police have recovered the body of a man missing at a dam in North Queensland. The 40-year-old man and his 9-year-old daughter fell from a broken-down boat at Kinchut Dam, southwest of Mackay, on Saturday morning. The girl was rescued a short time later. The man's body was found this morning. A report is being prepared for the coroner. There's hope that prices on a range of ordinary household goods might fall in coming months as the government axes almost 500 tariffs. Import taxes will be abolished on everything from toothbrushes to washers and dryers. Our political reporter Tom Lowry joins us now from Parliament House. Good afternoon, Tom. So why are these tariffs being dumped?
Yeah, good afternoon, Ros. The government's calling these nuisance tariffs. They're tariffs that are still sitting on the books but really aren't collecting any revenue, and it says it's time to dump about 500 of them in the upcoming May budget. These are import taxes that are no longer being charged on a whole bunch of items because of free trade deals that have been done with a range of countries and groups of countries around the world. Australia has free trade deals with China, with North America, with Korea, with the UK, with all sorts of different places. And that means the vast bulk of what's being imported into Australia doesn't have any tariffs or import taxes applied to it. But the government says even though these taxes aren't doing a whole lot, they're not raising a whole lot of revenue, they are causing a nuisance for businesses in particular. They just cause admin, a bit of paperwork here and there as these items are brought into Australia. That adds cost to business, so the government says if we can dump all of these nuisance tariffs, there will be savings for businesses, and there's a hope that might be passed on to consumers as well. But it's worthwhile being a little bit sceptical about that claim because, of course, there's a pretty good incentive for businesses to just absorb those savings rather than pass them on. Here's the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, speaking on this a little earlier today.
Removing these tariffs will streamline around $8.5 billion worth of annual trade. It will save businesses more than $30 million in compliance costs each year, 120 over the next 4. It will simplify the system, reduce costs, improve supply chain resilience, and make it easier and cheaper for business. And also, and I don't want to overstate this bit, it will provide a bit of extra help with the cost of living challenge by making everyday items just that little bit cheaper.
Tom, do we know exactly what's on the list?
We've got a few ideas from the government, Ros. There's things like toothbrushes, for example. We import tens of millions of dollars worth of toothbrushes every year, but only about $20,000 in revenue from the tariffs that exist on toothbrushes is actually brought in. So that's a prime candidate to be dumped. We're also thinking about things like washers and dryers, so washing machines and dryers, electric blankets, toasters, pyjamas, sanitary products as well are all being considered. There are some more unusual items on this list as well. Things like roller coasters and dodgem cars. We import millions of dollars in roller coasters and dodgem cars every year. There's tariffs on those that could well be scrapped. Bamboo chopsticks, fishing reels as well. All of these details will be ironed out before the May budget. If that is passed, if it does become law, these should be dumped around about July.
Thanks, Tom. Police are investigating the death of a man in Melbourne's east. It's believed the man died after an argument with another man at a property in Belgrave. Leanne Wong reports.
Police say they're still trying to determine the exact circumstances of a man's death in Belgrave yesterday. They say they believe that this man got into an argument with another man at a home on Gembrook Belgrave Road late yesterday afternoon at about 4:30, and that following this altercation, a man has died at the scene and he's yet to be formally identified, while another man in his 30s has been formally questioned by police but has since been released pending further inquiries. Now, yesterday, police spent a good part of the evening going over this property, searching for any evidence as to what may have unfolded. Forensic teams were on site. They were examining the driveway as well as taking photos of a car on the property. Police have urged anyone who may have information about this man's death to contact Crime Stoppers.
Leanne Wong there. Queensland police are trying to identify several men after 3 police cars were damaged at a large gathering organised by a rapper and YouTuber south of Brisbane on Saturday. Reporter Michael Rennie has the latest from Brisbane.
2 more men have been charged in relation to this hooning event in Logan over the weekend. A 20-year-old man has been charged with willful damage and other offences, while an 18-year-old man has been charged with hooning and evasion offences. Both men will appear in the Beenleigh Magistrates Court in April. Police are still appealing for anyone to come forward with information in regards to several other people in relation to this hooning event that happened at Waterford West on Saturday afternoon, and a street there needed to be closed during this event. Police cars were also damaged. 1 windscreen was smashed, 3 cars were damaged all up, and there's vision of a heavily tattooed man kicking the side of a police car. A 20-year-old man from Mount Gravatt had already been charged with breaking a police car aerial. At this event, also it was attended by a Sydney rapper. His name is Spanian. He has a large online following and he travels the world visiting dangerous neighbourhoods around the world.
Sydney motorists will fork out $195 billion in tolls between now and 2060, according to a new review into the city's toll roads. Nick Dole joins us now with more about this report. Hi there, Nick. So what issues has this review identified? And just talk us through some of the key recommendations.
Hi there, Ros. Well, this review was commissioned by the Labor government, and it's written by the former ACCC chair, Alan Fells, and also David Cousins, who was a Consumer Affairs Chief in Victoria. It's identified a road toll system in New South Wales that is serving the interests of private companies rather than motorists, and that's because the tolls are so expensive. This report has found that the city's reached toll saturation, essentially. Even though people want to use the toll roads, they are choosing more congested roads to avoid some of those charges, and therefore the congestion in the city is only getting worse. Now, there are a range of recommendations. Some of them are quite radical, including that the government essentially take back control over toll pricing in New South Wales, that it create something called Tollco, an entity that would set the prices in conjunction with the existing toll road companies, and I guess noting their contractual rights. But it would have a much greater say in the years ahead about what toll users would actually pay. It's also recommending a introduction of two-way tolling on some key roads here in New South Wales. So on things like the Harbour Tunnel, the Harbour Bridge, and also the Eastern Distributor, motorists can avoid tolls by going just one way, because at the moment they're not two-way. Under this recommendation, both of those journeys would be tolled. Now, that would have a much higher price for consumers using those roads, but that extra revenue would be used to bring down the tolls on some of Sydney's other key motorways. And it's also recommending that the government institute per kilometre charges for tolls, but that those charges decline the longer that motorists are on tolls. So in other words, someone coming from the far western suburbs might pay a certain price for the first 5 kilometres, and then that price would drop substantially for the next 5 and progressively keep dropping. So some pretty radical changes to the state's tolling operators. Let's hear from Professor Fells, who was identifying some of the issues that he found in his interim report.
Each price is different. There's inconsistency, unfairness, doesn't help good functioning of the motorways, all the different prices. So move to a unified, sensible system as step one. Step two, bit later on, review the overall level of tolls.
So, Nick, the government commissioned this report. What's it going to do with it?
Not much at the moment, Ros. The government says that it needs time to review some of the recommendations that this panel has presented. It says that, in fact, the Premier says that this report was way worse than he was expecting in terms of some of the impacts on road users. He says that it's essentially belled the cat, in his words, about the unfairness of privatising assets and then giving them to a company that has a monopoly, and that company he's referring to is Transurban, which runs 11 out of the 13 toll roads here in New South Wales. As I say, some of these ideas are quite radical, and the Premier doesn't want to be I guess, drawn on exactly what he'll do yet. He says it's not government policy at the moment, but he says there are key issues of fairness that he hopes to accomplish in his response.
The goal here is for people to pay less on New South Wales roads, and for those that use them the most, particularly those who are not serviced by public transport in Western Sydney on the New South Wales Central Coast, are not screwed as a result of contracts that have been signed and locked into for decades into the future.
And Transurban, the company that runs many of the toll roads here in New South Wales, says it's still reviewing this interim report, but it notes it's not set in stone. It's certainly not government policy at the moment. And Infrastructure Partnerships Australia, which represents the interests of these toll road operators, says that some of this report seems sensible, but some of it seems very ill advised, and it says, quite simply, without toll road operators, many of Sydney's roads wouldn't exist. Ross.
Thanks, Nick. A ship carrying 200 tonnes of food for Gaza remains docked in Cyprus, with aid agencies working out the logistics to get supplies into the besieged area. The vessel is owned by the Spanish group Open Arms. It's been loaded with goods funded mostly by the UAE, but it's awaiting the construction of a makeshift jetty in Gaza, which has no port infrastructure. Israel says a new maritime route will bring aid directly to residents in Gaza.
We will bring the aid through a maritime route that is coordinated with the US on the security and humanitarian side, with the assistance of the Emirates on the civil side, and appropriate inspection in Cyprus. We will arrive with goods from international organisations with American assistance.
Desperately needed aid is also being delivered by air. The United States and Jordan have so far parachuted more than 135,000 meals this month. The US is also sending an army vessel carrying equipment to build a temporary pier in Gaza. Israel's war with Hamas has created a humanitarian crisis. Most of the 2.3 million residents have been displaced. The UN has warned a quarter of the population is one step away from famine.
I came here to buy, but I can't find anything. There's nothing. There are no dates or milk or anything. One can't find anything for their children. All these canned goods are full of germs that infect the stomach. We need vegetables and fruit to feed our children.
Israel is showing no signs of easing its ground and air assault on Gaza. It started 5 months ago when Hamas led an attack on southern Israel, killing about 1,200 people and taking more than 250 others hostage. Gaza's health ministry says more than 31,000 Palestinians have been killed in the conflict. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has told a German newspaper that IDF operations have killed at least 13,000 terrorists. The US President Joe Biden is urging the Israeli leader to pay more attention to the toll on civilians.
He's hurting Israel more than helping Israel by making the rest of the world, it's contrary to what Israel stands for. And I think it's a big mistake. So I want to see a ceasefire. And I'm starting with a major exchange of prisoners for a 6-week period. We're going into Ramadan. It should be nothing happening. And we should build off of that ceasefire.
With the Muslim holy month starting today, hopes of striking a ceasefire appear dashed, at least for now, with mediators unable to strike a deal. Both sides are blaming each other for the deadlock. Portugal's centre-right Democratic Alliance Party is poised to form a minority government, with early results showing it's secured 33% of the vote. But the party's leadership has ruled out any deal with the right-wing populist party Chega, which is on track to double its result from the last election to more than 14%. The election was triggered by Prime Minister Antonio Costa's resignation amid a graft investigation. Issues dominating the campaign in Western Europe's poorest country include a crippling housing crisis, low wages, sagging healthcare and corruption. While Christopher Nolan's epic Oppenheimer and Greta Gerwig's Barbie were tipped to win many of the major awards at the Oscars ceremony, attention has quickly turned to other performances. Poor Things, the Frankenstein-inspired film starring Emma Stone, has snagged 3 top prizes, including Best Production and Costume Design. Oppenheimer has won Best Film Editing, and Robert Downey Jr. has won his first Oscar for his supporting role in the film. Music was also celebrated at the ceremony with star-studded performances from all 5 nominated songs. While audiences await Ryan Gosling's performance of I'm Just Ken from Barbie, Billie Eilish and her brother Phineas have already performed their hit from the same film. It is the duo's 3rd Oscar performance in 5 years. Let's take a listen. 'Cause News agencies have recalled a photo of Princess Catherine and her children, citing authenticity concerns. The picture was posted online by Kensington Palace, which says it was taken by Prince William last week. It was the first image since Catherine's abdominal surgery in January. But multiple news agencies have withdrawn the photo, asking those who were using the image to remove it.
They're saying that the photo shows an inconsistency in the alignment of Princess Charlotte's left hand. So I think the suggestion is that maybe a different frame of the same shoot has been, that particular area has been airbrushed in, if you like. So one piece from one picture has been put on another picture. That is the suggestion. And they're saying that breaks their editorial guidelines.
Let's get finance news now with Sam Yang. Hi, Sam. So Japan has officially avoided a technical recession.
Yeah, that's right. There's been a lot of focus lately on Japan's economy. It has recently lost its place as the world's third largest economy, slipping to fourth behind Germany. Today, Japan has revised economic data higher, reversing a quarterly contraction into positive annual growth and thereby avoiding a technical recession. Now, its GDP expanded at an annualized pace of 0.4% in the final 3 months of last year, the Cabinet Office reported today, reversing a 0.4% retreat initially reported. Now, Monday's data support the Bank of Japan's view that the economy continues to recover moderately, with companies willing to invest in the country. A majority of economists expect that the central bank to scrap the negative interest rate with its first hike since 2007 in March or April this year. Encouraging signs of wage growth this year have increased debates on the rate hike coming on March the 19th when the central bank concludes its next policy meeting. Let's bring up the Asian markets for you now. As you can see on the screen, Nikkei in Japan is plunging sharply by 2.5%. The Nikkei has recently set record highs more than 3 decades in the making since the last record at the end of 1989, rising above 60,000 points for the first time on March the 4th. Right now, it's below 39,000 points. Across the region, the NZ 50 is down around 0.8%. Markets in China, across China, Hang Seng and Shanghai are in the green.
So how's the Aussie market starting the week, Sam?
Well, the Australian share market is falling sharply today, tracking losses overseas. Let's take a look at the numbers now. The All Ords and the ASX 200 are down around 1.4% each. It's having its worst day in 2 months after touching an annual all-time high, in the previous session. All sectors are down except for the industrials. If we take a look at the movers now, Block, Core Lithium and Copper Travel Management are the standouts. On the way down, Arcadium Lithium, Bellevue Gold and Champion Iron are losing substantial ground. Now in the US, a mixed US employment report and steep fall for market rally Nvidia dragged US stocks lower. The Dow Jones Index down 0.2%, the S&P 500 shed 0.7% and the Nasdaq Composite lost 1.2%. Onto commodity markets now. Spot gold prices locked another record. Crude oil prices are pointing lower. And the Australian dollar is a little weaker against the greenback, buying around 66.2 US cents. And Ross, that's finance.
Thanks, Sam. Not only is food getting more expensive in Australia, but it's also getting smaller. However, unlike prices, how many grams or millilitres you get now compared to years ago is harder to track and easy for corporations to deny. But a new study has been able to confirm shrinkflation is happening here for at least one category of food, breakfast cereal. Iskander Razak explains.
Cereal, crunchy, sweet and abundant. But should you eat it for every meal? In Australia, about 125 million kilograms of cereal is bought every year, making it $1 billion industry. And with cost of living pressures biting everywhere, some think we should be eating even more. And surprise, surprise, one corporation thinks that's a fabulous idea.
So we're advertising about cereal for dinner. If you think about the cost of cereal for a family versus what they might otherwise do, that's going to be much more affordable.
But is it?
Deakin University has been tracking breakfast box prices, sizes and weights. It's found 7 products have shrunk 4% in size on average, or 54 grams in actual weight. The biggest loser was a version of this cereal, which is 17% lighter than it was 5 years ago. Not every box is shrinking, but sadly nothing is shrinking at the checkout. Of the 29 products tracked since 2019, prices are on average almost 40% more than 5 years ago. The biggest increase was $4 for Crunchy Nut, which is also 30 grams lighter. The smallest rise has been for this cereal, up $1.
Cereal does not stretch far at all.
Cereal is a repeat offender when it comes to shrinkflation.
Companies like Kellogg's sometimes say price rises are necessary to make their product healthier. And there's been a 67% reduction in sugar and 79% drop in salt in some goods. But that doesn't mean it's the healthiest choice for your heart or for your wallet, according to the experts.
I think it's exploiting a cost of living crisis, and many of the products, including in Kellogg's portfolio, aren't nutritious.
It's not a solution to the cost of living crisis, cereal for dinner. Like, it's just not. We need to increase income supports and we need to regulate pricing better.
Quick look at the national weather now. Sunny in Brisbane, partly cloudy in Sydney and Canberra. Melbourne mostly sunny, getting up to 37 degrees. Hobart a possible shower. Adelaide mostly sunny, a top there of 38. Sunny in Perth and showers with a possible storm for Darwin. You can keep up to date at news.abc.net.au and on ABC iView. Here are the top stories on ABC News. Parts of the country's southeast are sweltering through a third day of a severe heatwave that's set new autumn records. Temperatures are set to soar with warnings for parts of South Australia, Victoria, Tasmania and southern New South Wales. Some events have been cancelled, including Melbourne's Moomba March. A search is continuing for a 12-year-old boy missing from the Greater Western Sydney area. Hussein al-Mansouri has been missing since Saturday morning after disappearing from Auburn Memorial Park. The 12-year-old lives with Down syndrome and autism and is non-verbal. Authorities are urging people to keep an eye out for the boy, but not to approach him if he's spotted, as they fear he may run away. The government is preparing to scrap almost 500 tariffs on a range of imported items, including menstrual products, white goods and clothing from July. The change is designed to save business more than $30 million in yearly compliance costs, which the government says should help consumers as those costs are often passed on. And car buyers in outer suburbs are purchasing more electric vehicles than those in the inner city and regions. 43% of new EVs sold by Tesla and BYD last year were for people in outer metropolitan areas. The Electric Vehicle Council says cost of living pressures are driving the trend. Tonight's Four Corners goes inside Israel's war machine and speaks to some of the country's most powerful political and military voices. As the war rages in Gaza following the October the 7th attacks, the ABC's Global Affairs editor John Lyons sets out to discover what is Israel's strategy and intention.
Since October, more than 30,000 Gazans have been killed. 2/3 of them women and children.
Why did Israel need to kill so many people in Gaza?
We never target civilians.
You may not be targeting them, but they're dying in their tens of thousands.
Because they live, or those that control their life are these terrorists that are exploiting their existence.
Israel's dropping the bombs.
We have no other alternative. I try to avoid these casualties, and I can't. I was in the Israeli security cabinet and I know how the Israeli army is working. And is targeting in accordance, every target is getting the approval of the Justice Ministry. And if the army can approve that this is a legitimate target, it is.
Gaza Strip, it's 350 square kilometers. That's it. All in all, are about 40,000 terrorists. Paid as terrorists, trained as terrorists. You have to take into account the surrounding of those terrorists. It's many, many thousands, tens of thousands of terrorists.
Mr. Alon, one thing I don't understand is why does the most powerful military in the Middle East, Israel, backed by the most powerful military the world's ever seen, the United States, need to kill so many children?
We don't need to.
But you are.
There was no war like this ever fought. When we fight Hamas, it is the most populated battlefield ever fought in the history of wars. And in order to achieve our military goals, we have to hit military targets. But in a populated area in which we are fighting in Gaza, it is almost impossible to hit a military target without killing or hitting civilians. Hamas deliberately are using civilian targets, schools, hospitals, UN institutions, in order to place military targets in civilians' institutions. And even according to international law, we have the right to hit the military installation if it is used deliberately. So Hamas is doing everything in order for us to kill or to use their people as a human shield.
I don't think that anyone made a deliberate decision to kill children.
I'm not saying it was a deliberate decision. I'm asking why did the most powerful army kill so many children?
No, I want to describe it in a different way. So Israel called upon the population to leave the area for some 2 or 3 weeks repeatedly.
We are told that the idea of doing everything to avoid civilian casualties is a blunt lie. Straight lie. It's a hard statement to say about my own army, but it's the truth.
Well, Global Affairs Editor John Lyons is with me now in the studio. Hi there, John. So you had access, as we saw there, to some very senior people in Israel. What did you make of what they told you?
Well, Ros, one thing that came through, even from some of those senior Israeli people who are defending the war, is their lack of respect for Benjamin Netanyahu. Even from the former Prime Minister, Ehud Barak, who we just saw then, said he lies. He's always lying. He can't be trusted. And I said, so the man the world's relying on to avoid a regional conflict is completely trustworthy. He said, well, yes, that's not news. And Ami Ayalon, who we also saw there, one of the former heads of Shin Bet, is warning about the influence of the far right on Israeli politics. We've talked about it before, you and I, on this program, but he's talking about the Minister for National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who he is a former head of Shabak, of Shin Bet, the security service. He describes that minister as a terrorist. So the divisions within Israel are huge. At the moment, the public's still behind the war in Israel, yet the United States is putting extraordinary pressure now on Israel to stop this war.
And yes, it still goes on.
Still goes on. Israel is defying its biggest supporter and the provider of the bombs. Israel is saying, no, we're not listening to you.
So with all that division at the top of authorities in Israel, what does that mean for the future course of the war?
Well, it means, in a way, and I put this to Ehud Barak, that it's Benjamin Netanyahu's political future. This is my assessment, having spoken to all these people. His political future, he stays Prime Minister as long as the war continues, which, when you think about it, is an extraordinary situation, that he's reliant on that. The other extraordinary situation is the role of the United States. If you're in Gaza now, you're a child in Gaza, and you look up at the sky, the United States, there are 2 things being dropped by the United States or by Israel on behalf of the with US weapons. There's these American bombs are being dropped on Gaza, and American aid packages are being dropped by America. Never before in history, I don't think, have both aid packages and bombs from the same source been dropped on the same group of people.
But we heard from Joe Biden overnight strongly criticising Netanyahu's approach to the war. Other Western countries have also voiced their concerns. Netanyahu, for his part, has remained firm. So who can bring the most influence to bear, if not the US?
The US could if it wanted to. Tonight we show in the program that if a strong US president said, enough's enough, I've told you it's indiscriminate bombing, that's the word that Joe Biden's used, we are cutting off your supply of bombs as of tomorrow, the war would stop. The US won't do that. And so you've got this extraordinary situation, and Joe Biden's now paying a political price. In states like Michigan, he's in danger of losing those. And so Benjamin Netanyahu, for his own survival, is saying to the Americans, because that's the support, they want Hamas completely and utterly annihilated. They're saying no to America. I don't think we've ever seen as serious a rift between the US and Israel as we're seeing now.
Just finally, if Trump were to win the presidential election, what then?
Who knows, really? I mean, who can predict? It could be anything.
You can watch Four Corners at 8:30 Eastern on ABC TV. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Rose.
And there it is. You can watch the full episode tonight at 8:30 on ABC TV and anytime on iView. New data out today on electric vehicle sales across the country has debunked a stereotype about who's driving EVs. The biggest areas for EV purchases last year were in outer metropolitan areas. For more, climate reporter Joe Lauder joins us. Hi there, Joe. So can you tell us about this new data that's been published today?
Hi, Ros. Yeah, so this is data that we got at the climate team here at the ABC from the EV Council of Australia. And so it's a postcode breakdown of the sales from last year, from 2023, of Australia's two biggest electric car makers. So Tesla and BYD sell about 75% of the EVs in Australia. And this is a postcode breakdown, and it's really interesting because it found for the first time that the biggest group that is buying EVs are outer metropolitan areas. So as you can see in the graph, about 43% of people who bought an EV from the two car makers last year were living in outer metropolitan areas. So there's about 39% of people, so drivers who bought an EV last year, were in inner metropolitan areas. And about 18% came from regional and rural areas. So the kind of places we're talking about, number one in the country, the postcode that had the most EVs sold there was Roose Hill and Kellyville. So this is in Sydney's northwest. It's about 43 kilometres from the CBD. It had over 530 EVs sold there. Other places like in Melbourne, Werribee came out really highly. That's between Melbourne and Geelong. Goodna near Brisbane, Craigieburn in Melbourne as well. So these are these outer metropolitan areas that are really driving this switch to electric cars.
So Joe, why are people in outer metro areas switching to EVs? What have they told you?
Well, the number one reason that we heard and that the experts told us is petrol costs. Petrol's been going up for a number of years. Australians are spending a lot on transport costs. And so, especially in outer metropolitan areas, I should say as well, there's often longer commutes, there's not as much access to public transport. And the difference between EVs and traditional combustion cars is, although EVs at the moment have a higher price tag for them, they're much cheaper to run. It's so much cheaper to charge your car with electricity than to fill it up with petrol. The other thing as well is maintenance costs. It's much cheaper to maintain an electric car than a traditional one because they have fewer parts. And so the EV drivers I spoke to one guy who lives down in the Mornington Peninsula, southeast of Melbourne. He got his car a year ago. He drove 37,000 kilometres last year, and he said it saved him thousands and thousands of dollars. So that's definitely the number one reason.
So the sales data, Joe, shows where people are buying EVs, but how much of the market are electric cars in Australia now, and how do we compare to other parts of the world?
So Australia is still behind globally with other comparable countries. Last year in 2023, it was about just over 7% of electric cars sold. If you include hybrid cars, so different types of hybrid, they're lower emissions cars altogether, that goes up to about 16%. It's changing all the time. The rates are doubling. Also, the federal government is looking to introduce a fuel efficiency standard next year, which it says is going to encourage car makers to sell more electric cars to Australia. So the EV Council is expecting that rate to go up really significantly in the next few years. But as I said, we are still behind globally at the moment.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
Now, how many times have you been vaccinated against COVID? Well, in Germany, a man has become the subject of scientific curiosity after receiving over 200 COVID vaccinations over a period of 2 years. He survived, apparently without any major side effects, and that's piqued the interest of scientists who've looked into the effects of hyper-vaccination on the human body. Host of the Health Report and What's That Rash, Dr. Norman Swan, tells us more about the case.
He's a 62-year-old man. It's been written up as a scientific paper. And he was discovered by the German Red Cross in Dresden, where they noticed him coming up in multiple records, I think is what happened. And they actually reported him to the police because they were concerned in those days. Remember the days where you had to be vaccinated to keep your job in some instances. Was he selling? Was he having all these vaccinations so he could sell the vaccination certificates as proof? Now, I don't think that's come to anything. But I mean, it's extraordinary. I mean, in one 9-month period, he had 130 immunizations. He was going from clinic to clinic, covering his tracks to some extent. He was having multiple different vaccines. So who knows what? It's a mystery in terms of the paper why he was doing this. I mean, one speculation is that he had Munchausen syndrome, which is where you're obsessed with medical procedures. You like medical procedures, you like medical environments. Maybe that's what it was, we don't know. But the interesting scientific question is, what did it do to him? First thing to say is, well, he, perhaps unsurprisingly, he'd never had a natural COVID infection. I suppose you could say, well, why would you if you're getting immunized at least once a week or twice a week? But the second thing, and more serious one, is there's been this debate, which you and I have talked about before, which is and it was really when in the early days of the pandemic, in the early days of the vaccine, nobody was really too sure what the right dosage schedule was to get you primed up. And was it once every 8 weeks? Do you extend it? Moderna was a little bit longer between doses than Pfizer and so on. Did we give too many boosters too close together and therefore people's immune system was a bit dampened to the vaccine? And that debate still goes on. So they compared his immune response to the vaccine and his immune system to controls, to people who'd had 3 booster shots. In other words, a normal course of vaccine and booster. And what they showed was that there was no sign of dampening of his immune system. So in other words, remember this is just one person, but it is extreme. So his immune system was not dampened to the vaccine. He was still getting a response to the vaccine, and it was a very good response to the vaccine, a little bit higher in fact than the average person's, but not so much higher that he was getting extra benefit from it. But his immune system was still in pretty good shape.
So his immune system is fine, but what about other areas of his health, having hundreds of COVID vaccines? What does that do?
Well, I think I'd be much more concerned about his mental health than his psychological well-being and why he was doing all that than the vaccine. But there was no sign of any other untoward effects of the vaccine. So for everybody watching us now, this is do not go out and have 217 COVID vaccinations. But in this case of one person, I mean, these stories of one person emerge every so often. The 95-year-old man who's had 25 eggs a day for the whole life, or he's smoked 100 cigarettes a day, and they're as fit as they ever were. There's always going to be these odd outliers that you can't extrapolate from to the rest of the world. But it is an interesting. Actually, they called him, by the way. That was we don't know what his name was or is, and it stands for hyper-vaccinated individual from Magdeburg, Magdeburg being in Germany. Him.
Norman Swan there. Bitcoin miners are celebrating as the price of the world's most famous cryptocurrency soars again. However, there are warnings that the profits in this new age industry are marginal and volatile. Business reporter Amelia Turzon has been looking into this and she joins us now. Hi there, Amelia. So let's get to basics first. What is Bitcoin mining?
Yes, the basics are necessary here, Roz. Bitcoin mining is essentially a massive industry around the world where heaps of computers, millions of computers, are all working to solve complex puzzles. Doing this is essentially securing the Bitcoin network. Bitcoin, of course, is a cryptocurrency that isn't attached to central banks. It operates through its own coding. Now, the Bitcoin miners, as part of solving the puzzles to secure their network, they actually get Bitcoin in return. They get a lot of money at the moment because Bitcoin's price has surged again. One of the best explanations for this was just recently given to me by a company, an Australian company that's listed on the NASDAQ. Here's how they describe Bitcoin mining.
Mining is very simple. Every 10 minutes, the Bitcoin protocol generates a random number. And essentially, all these computers around the world use trial and error brute force to guess that random number. The first computer to do so wins a few $100,000 worth of Bitcoin.
So the price of Bitcoin has recently surged again. It's up around 60,000 US a coin. That company that was just speaking there managed to mine 300 or more Bitcoins last month, which works out to around $30 million. So of course you can understand why they're celebrating. They're making a lot more at the money than when Bitcoin crashed, when it was down near 16,000 US dollars a coin.
So is Bitcoin mining now profitable again? Or what are the economics of this?
So I spoke to an Australian expert, Daniel Schlavig, who explains that Bitcoin mining is really this tight balance of how much you're going to pay for the power to power these intense computers that are involved in Bitcoin mining versus the cost of the infrastructure, the cost of some workers to set up these facilities, and then how much you get back in Bitcoin, how much you manage to win through Bitcoin mining, and the current price of the asset on the market. He thinks that Bitcoin mining is marginally profitable, but he describes it as intensely competitive, especially at the moment when the price of Bitcoin is so high and lots of people are seeking to mine it. Here is what he said to me.
Is a very tight margin in a very competitive market. So if people envision Bitcoin mining as a genius get-rich-quick scheme, that's not at all the case.
So why is the Bitcoin price itself rising again, Amelia, and what do critics say about cryptocurrencies?
So the price of Bitcoin started really rising again towards the end of last year, and that was as we were hearing that regulators in the US were going to approve some funds, ETFs, to use Bitcoin that would allow investors to essentially invest in Bitcoin without directly needing to get into it. It's kind of a way that they could invest without having as much exposure, as we saw was so devastating for investors during the collapse of FTX. We're also hearing some rumblings that just generally Bitcoin is being seen as a safer asset again. Of course, there's some critics of cryptocurrency who say it's intensely speculative, that it's a bubble, that it's set to burst. So will it crash again? Who knows?
Thanks, Amelia. Let's get sport news now with Daniel Garb. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Roz.
So aerial skier Danielle Scott has claimed another world title.
That she has. She's defended her world title, in fact, in aerial skiing. That's without having to jump in the final in Kazakhstan due to the thick fog. So her qualifying jump was enough to retain her title, which she's delighted about. She didn't win a single event this season, but she had 4 second-placed finishes. That was enough to win the crown, and she was absolutely delighted about it.
I'm just so incredibly happy. This is a dream come true to come back-to-back and win the Globe twice. Every jump counts is all I can think about right now, because with the qualification, you know, the weather was much better. I did a nice jump and it's paid off, because with finals being cancelled, yeah, every jump counts.
And in the title race in the English Premier League, Dan, that's become even more interesting.
We're going to have one of the epic finishes to a Premier League season, that is for sure. And Manchester City face Arsenal at the end of the month. So we are set for an awesome finish. Just 1 point separating 3 teams, Arsenal, City and Liverpool, with 10 games to go.
One of golf's big names has taken out a big event.
That he has. Scotty Scheffler has won the Arnold Palmer Invitational on the PGA Tour after shooting a final round of 66 to win by 5 shots from US Open reigning champion in Wyndham Clark. He is the world #1. Now, those rankings don't mean as much at the moment because of the Live Golf introduction, of course, and those players not being given ranking points. But Scotty Scheffler still has strong claims for that position. It's his first win in around a year. Cam Davis, the Aussie, finished 18th. Minwoo Lee struggling a bit at the start of the season. He finished in a tie for 44th. This is all about Scotty Scheffler, though, tuning up beautifully for the Masters, and he's happy to win this big crown.
It's really special. Mr. Palmer meant a lot to me, meant a lot to us as professional golfers and the game of golf, and so it's very special to be able to sit here and wear his red sweater again, and I'm very proud to be the champion in his tournament.
That's all in sport for now, Roz.
Thanks, Dan. Now for the weather, here's Stephanie Ferrier.
A large cloud band stretches from the top end all the way down to Tasmania, while this high pressure ridge that is sitting stubbornly in the Tasman is keeping it hot for South Australia and the lower interior, preventing any cool change from moving in and flushing out some of that heat. So that means that unfortunately there's no relief from these heatwave conditions until tomorrow for Victoria and at least Wednesday or Thursday for South Australia. In Melbourne, we're seeing a long weekend of consecutive days in the high 30s, which hasn't been experienced in March since 1942. So we are seeing extreme fire danger ratings for South Australia's West Coast, Eastern Eyre Peninsula, Lower Eyre Peninsula, the Mount Lofty Ranges, Yorke Peninsula and Lower South East, and also Victoria's southwest. And in the west, there's a severe weather warning for possibly life-threatening flash flooding in WA's Eucla and the southern interior. And that monsoon trough up north will continue to feed in that humid and unstable air, generating rain and storms stretching down through the Nullarbor. We're expecting another 100 millimetres in the Nullarbor area over the next couple of days. Now, for tomorrow's weather, Brisbane, you'll have a possible shower and a top of 30 degrees. Sydney will be sunny and 31. Canberra, mostly sunny and 33. Melbourne, partly cloudy. There's that cool change coming through, a top of just 24. Hobart, a morning shower or two and 20. Adelaide, I'm afraid it's still in the 30s for you, partly cloudy and a top of 33. Perth will be partly cloudy and 30 degrees, and Darwin will have showers. It's getting up to 30.
That's ABC News for now. Reminder, you can keep up to date on all the latest news across all your devices at news.abc.net.au and on ABC iView. I'm Roz Childs. Thanks for your company.